Governor Kemp, I thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. My first question is about your deployment of National Guard troops throughout Georgia, some 3,000. What is their mission right now?
Well, thanks, Brad, for having me on. And we've deployed not only the National Guard, but a lot of other state resources to partner with our local law enforcement and community leaders all across the state to make sure that we're protecting the lives and the livelihoods and the property of all our citizens. We've had quite a great response, I think, over the weekend. Very proud of the team at Georgia National Guard, but also Georgia State Patrol, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Corrections, Department of Juvenile Justice, Community Supervision. We had a lot of people that were engaged to be in support of the local police agencies to provide an environment for those peaceful protesters to really voice their concern and to call for justice. And I think most of the country supports them in that. I certainly do. Unfortunately, we have had some agitators that have embedded with some of these protesters, and as you saw Friday night in Atlanta, started causing some major disruption and destruction. And we were asked to bring in the National Guard late into the evening on Friday. We had them stood up and prepared along with a lot of other agencies that I mentioned earlier, and we were able to calm that situation down Friday night. We came up with a plan working in conjunction with the Atlanta Police Department Saturday morning. Had a really good weekend up here in Atlanta. A lot of peaceful protests, and then we were also we were able to disrupt the disruptors, if you will. And the same thing happened in other parts of our state. Very, very peaceful events because of a strong show of force and compassion for those that want justice in places like Athens and Savannah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Governor Kemp. Are you pleased with the response to the protests and the protesters themselves? And I'm primarily talking about outside of Atlanta, because outside of Atlanta, things have been a bit more peaceful than they have there in the capital city. You think things are going okay so far?
They have, yes. It went really well yesterday, but it's because we had that strong law enforcement and National Guard presence. We know that in Savannah last night there were instigators there. We believe that some of those perhaps came from Charleston, where they caused disruption on Saturday night. We had been tracking a lot of those individuals throughout the day yesterday, and that's their game plan. They try to infiltrate with people that are simply out letting their voices being heard and demanding justice, which we support. And that's really what's so hard about this mission. But thankfully, we have a lot of experienced people that got on top of that very early and responded in an appropriate way, really striking that difficult balance in this circumstance. And I think it's worked very well in Georgia. And we know from what we've seen on the national news, that's not the case in other cities around the United States. So for that, I'm grateful.
Do you think that these demonstrations, these protests, are impacting your attempt to reopen the state of Georgia?
Well, I think they certainly impacted some things in very limited places in downtown Atlanta and perhaps Savannah yesterday. I think those will be very short-lived. It's very calm in Atlanta this morning. I just got an update from Director Bryson over at the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. We're tracking a lot of local protests today. They all appear to be peaceful. We've spoken with local law enforcement. They're not too concerned, but they know that we have resources on the ground and available to call up at a moment's notice and to respond very quickly like we did all throughout the weekend. So I feel really good about where we are, but that's one reason I extended the state of emergency through next weekend, called up to 3,000 National Guard so we can continue to have plenty of resources, not only here in Metro Atlanta, but all across our state. No matter a small community or a large one, we'll be there to support the local leaders and support those that want to have that peaceful protest. I think it was very interesting last night in Atlanta. We had a large group that we tracked and supported in a peaceful protest all around the metro area yesterday, down to from Centennial Olympic Park up through the Capitol to the 17th Street Bridge and back, and we really had no issues with that group. When the curfew set in, they instructed everyone to go home and come back again another day to protest later, not to violate the order. But then we had another group that was the instigators that didn't abide by the protest, and that's who we had to deal with last night, and we did that in a very swift and forceful way, and there were arrests made, but that was few and far between last night.
Governor Kemp, I probably just have time for one more question, and I do want to switch over to the coronavirus. For all intents and purposes, it looks like the reopening of Georgia is going well as it relates to cases of the virus. Do you agree with that, and do you think you're getting enough credit for it? You led the nation.
Yeah, well, I'm not too worried about getting credit for it. I'll let history be the judge of my decisions. We're focused on the day-to-day actions of protecting the health of our citizens, but also protecting the health and the livelihoods of our citizens in regards to our economic situation. There's a lot of people that have really taken it on the chin financially, as well as our state revenues, local revenues, and we got to reopen our state. We cannot continue in this posture to support the missions that we have in state government and in places like public health and at our local hospitals and other places without opening our state back up. I will say it's gone very well. We've taken a measured approach. Some people are ready to reopen, some are not. We're supporting all of those. But I do think there's, a more move back to the new normal than it was certainly a month ago. So I feel good about where we are. Our numbers continue to look good. I got a detailed update on where we are. Our number of COVID patients in the hospital continued to drop over the weekend. Our numbers continue to remain steady or falling, even though we're testing more vulnerable populations like nursing home staff and residents now.
Governor Kemp, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule that's getting busier by the minute. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon on the Means Report. Thank you, sir.
Have a great day. Thanks, Brad.
You too. That's Georgia Governor Brian Kemp.